Good evening and welcome. Tonight we'll be going over the history and geography of Malta. Now, as you can see, Malta is very, very small. I'm trying to get the distance here where you can see really how big it is. It is not a large place, right? It's a very, very tiny little island chain in the Mediterranean Sea. Let me grab a pencil to show you some things. Sicily is just up there, and Libya is just down there. It's kind of in the middle of those two places. There are three main islands in Malta. The first is also called Malta. It's the main island here, and it's where the majority of the Maltese population lives. As you can see, there are lots of towns and villages. There's pretty much not a lot of spare places, nothing really empty or abandoned or anything like that. The capital city of Valletta is located right here on this peninsula in the Grand Harbor. And as you can see, there are lots of bays all along here, which has been very, very good for its history, and it has a lot of significant importance. And let me see what else I have to show you on Malta. I think we'll just talk about it in its history. Let's move on. Right here we have Comino, which is very tiny and not really inhabited. It's mostly just a tourist stopover kind of place. And then we have the island of Gozo, which is also pretty populated, pretty covered in people. Victoria is the largest city on Gozo. Now, what you can see, if you look closely at this map, there are no rivers, there are no lakes. It's pretty much just all hills, really beautiful Mediterranean landscape. There's also some really beautiful coral reefs around the island. They also have a couple of rocks that they claim, mainly here in the Camino Channel, and the biggest one is down here. It's called Filfla. And probably what you can notice looking at this map is that these names are very, very bizarre. I mean, they're kind of very strange to pronounce. I still haven't got a good grip on Maltese language, so I'm not going to try a lot of the names and places in this video tonight, just so I don't embarrass myself. But the Maltese language is really, really distinct, and we're going to find out why in its history. So people have been living on these islands for a long, long time. The first peoples would have arrived around 5200 BCE, and at that time there was a lot of animals on the island, many of which are extinct now, including dwarf hippos, dwarf elephants, and giant swans. It's possible that they were hunted to extinction by the early peoples. The early peoples also built a lot of farms in the area. There's a lot of things called cart tracks, I think. I have a book to show you. I'll obviously zoom out so I can show you the book. Cart tracks where just in the hills you can see two lines just going, and those were the carts that were just driven over and over and over until they left permanent marks in the land. And Malta is also covered in ancient megalithic temples. There's not a few listed on here. There's one right here. They're all very bizarrely pronounced, but absolutely just covered in ancient megalithic temples and tombs and all kinds of ancient buildings that are still pretty sound today. New ones are being discovered all the time. They're literally just digging them up as new farms are being plowed. They find whole underground temples and things like that. And it is so remarkable. Like I said, I'll show you some pictures in the book. Very, very interesting. Buildings that are older than the pyramids, very fascinating. However, these early peoples disappeared around 2500 BCE. Nobody knows why. There are a few other people, mainly from Sicily, that came by and Also built their own dolmens and things, but it never really reached the level of the early peoples of Malta. The first major civilization to arrive and take over the island were the Phoenicians, which was a culture based on that end of the Mediterranean in what's now Lebanon. They were really big on sailing and traveling, so they explored all of the Mediterranean, all of the southern European coast and northern African coast. So of course they took advantage of this island right smack dab in the Mediterranean. They also established the city of Carthage in northern Africa in what's now Tunisia. So once the Phoenician civilization collapsed, the Carthaginian one rose. So the islands came under Carthaginian power in 332 BCE. Very famously, the Carthaginians fought with the Romans in what's known as the Punic Wars, the First and Second Punic Wars, which Carthage lost both of them and was ultimately destroyed after the Second Punic War. So then the islands came under Roman rule, were a part of the Roman Empire. Very interesting story during this time period. Apparently in the year 60 CE, St. Paul, you can see St. Paul's Bay there, St. Paul evidently shipwrecked on the island, and he brought Christianity to the island, and it's believed to be one of the earliest countries like territories, to convert to Christianity. So the Roman Empire starts to fall apart, right? It gets split into the Western Empire and the Eastern Byzantine Empire. The islands came under the Western sphere of influence, and in doing so it wound up getting attacked by the barbarians, mainly the Vandals and the Ostrogoths. But in 533, the Byzantines came back with a vengeance and took the islands back over, and it came under Byzantine influence. And then in 870 it was conquered by the Arabs. Now the Arab rule is pretty important to the Maltese legacy because the language today mostly derives from Arabic. It also has a lot of Italian and French influences, but it's mainly derived from a lot of Arabic grammar and words and things like that. That was their biggest impact on Malta. Eventually, in 1091, the Normans invaded, which was a Viking group from like northern France-ish area. They had taken over Sicily, so then they came and took over Malta. And eventually, then therefore it became part of the Kingdom of Sicily, which was eventually kind of absorbed into the sphere of influence of the Holy Roman Empire. I don't think it was ever officially part of the Holy Roman Empire. It was just like controlled by it. So the year is now 1530. The Holy Roman Emperor has a little issue in that there are these knights that were expelled from Jerusalem known as the Knights Hospitaller. And they were like they were knights, of course, but they specialized in like medicine and taking care of people who were battling. So they were just like wandering around Europe trying to find a new base. So the emperor gave them Malta. It's like leased it out to them basically. And in 1565 that became very important. The lead knight at the time was named Jean Parisot de Valette. And it was at this time that the Ottoman Empire came knocking on the door and said, "We're here to conquer," because that's what the Ottomans were really good at. And that led to the Great Siege of Malta, which is considered like one of the biggest historical moments of Malta. So the knights fought against the Ottoman Empire, one of the strongest forces in the world. The siege lasted for 4 months, and the knights won. They defended the island from the Ottomans, which is pretty heroic. And that lead knight established a new capital city down here, so it'll be easier to defend the island, and that's why it's named Valletta. It's named after him. So that's how Malta remained. It was pretty like Italian influenced during this time as well, being so close to Italy and Sicily. But then in 1798, Napoleon literally came through with his army on their way to Egypt, and he took over the island. and he made it part of the French Empire, tried to make everyone speak French. And the Maltese people did not like this very much at all, and they led a revolt. And they asked a lot of other countries to help out in their fight against the French, mainly Great Britain. The British came and really helped out the Maltese to the point where the French surrendered in 1800. So while the French control was very, very brief, it still left a mark on the language and culture of Malta as well. So at this point, the Maltese language and culture is like a fusion of Arab, Italian, and French. And by Arab, I mean like very ancient Arabs, basically like a culture that didn't exist anymore. It's just that people were so isolated from the rest of the Arab culture that they became their own kind of interesting Arab culture mixed, like I said, with Italian, and then all the French influence, and now here comes the British, and they get mixed in with a lot of British influence. Malta became part of the British Empire in 1814, and they implemented the English language in Malta. Of course, Maltese was still spoken all throughout the island, still is today. English and Maltese are the official languages. But Malta became very important to Great Britain for quite a few reasons throughout history. The first was that the Suez Canal was completed in 1869, and Malta is pretty much like on the way to the Suez Canal, so it became very, very important for shipping. It became a very important stopover port. It was also very important during World War I. It was known as the Nurse of the Mediterranean, where a lot of Allied ships could come and dock and resupply and, like the name implies, help wounded soldiers. And then during World War II, there were lots of British ships docked here at the time, and being between Italy and Northern Africa, which got conquered by the Italian fascists, the Axis powers did not want a British island right smack dab in the middle of their territory, so they bombed this island to smithereens. Malta was bombed harder than, like, London. Like, it was one of the most heavily bombed places in Europe during World War II. To the point where Britain gave the entire population of Malta the St. George Cross as like a thank you for holding out against the Axis powers. So eventually, Malta sought out independence, which it gained on September 21st, 1964. It is part of the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth. And what's interesting is that Malta is considered a neutral country, kind of like Switzerland is. So there was an event where the United States and the USSR met on the island to negotiate and basically ended the Cold War, which I think is a pretty neat little milestone of history. Malta also joined the European Union in 2004 and became part of the Eurozone in 2008, which means that they use the euro as its currency. And essentially that's where we are today in Malta. Malta very heavily relies on tourism. It very heavily relies on, how do I say this? Passports that people can buy and become a citizen of Malta. Yeah, you can imagine where that goes. And yeah, it's a very interesting little country with their own very, very unique culture. So why didn't I show you some pictures of Malta? Let me zoom out real quick so you can actually see the book. Alright, let me show you some pictures of Malta. Look how beautiful. Gorgeous little boats and the amazing buildings in Valletta. So gorgeous. I also meant to say, I knew I was forgetting something. Another way that Malta earns a lot of money is that they allow a lot of movies and TV shows to be filmed here, like Game of Thrones. The movie Gladiator was largely filmed in Malta, and most famously, there might be a picture in here, they filmed the 90s Popeye movie here with Robin Williams, and they built a whole Popeye village on the coast that's still there today. You can go visit it. It's like a little tourist site. So here we can see, oops, sorry about that. Prime Minister Edward Fenech Adami and Foreign Minister Joseph Borg in 2003. So I actually didn't check to see like who's in power now, so hopefully that's not accurate. Anyway, this was known as the Azure Window in Gozo. It was a big tourist destination, and a lot of films and things are also filmed here. However, it was destroyed in a storm in 2017, so now it just looks like this. It's very, very sad. It's believed to be like a combination of like climate change and also human interference of people walking across it so often, or even people widening it so more ships could come through. Here's Valletta. Like I said, it's like a little peninsula, so you can see the little, this is like at the tip of it, I believe. Very cool ancient buildings and very modern ones as well. Look at this. Very, very gorgeous. It's what a lot of places in Malta looks like. Here's an aerial view of Marfa Point. Then you can see Comino right here, and then there's Gozo right there. There's a map of Malta, but I think mine is better. You can just see some of the major cities there. Here is Filfla, the tiny rock that Malta owns. Look at it's a Maltese hedgehog, how cute. And this is an old well in Medina, because like I said, there's no rivers or lakes, so most of their water, at least back in the old times, was collected from rainwater, but now they have a big desalination program, so they can have some water. Some carob beans, one of the many crops that they grow on the islands. There's not a lot of arable land, but what they do, they make a lot of use of. And here's another beautiful picture of Valletta. There's something very like, almost like a combination of Venice and Florence about it, isn't it? It's very Italian, I suppose. Here's one of the megalithic temples, and like I said, I'm not sure how to pronounce some of these words, so I'm just not going to try, but isn't that incredible? It's like Stonehenge eat your heart out, basically, on this island. And here is the Church of St. John the Baptist. Here's another one. It's so incredible that people built all these different temples all throughout the island, and they're still pretty intact. Here is the Hypogeum. I think it's Chalsafliani. I'm probably wrong, but it's a huge underground tomb from, let's see, what year is it from? Does it say? It doesn't, but it's very old. Here's the Knights of St. John, one of the early knights on the islands. I think, yeah, and then they became the Knights of Malta, I believe, and here they are, the modern day Knights of St. John. Here we go. Doing a reenactment from the Great Siege. Here is Domitov, very famous politician back in the day. And this is a photo from World War II with a British ship patrolling the harbor. Let's see what else we have. The Independence Monument. Very cool. Oh, symbols of the state. Let's read about the flag. So this is the shield, obviously, but let's just read about the flag. It says, the national flag of Malta consists of two equal vertical stripes of white and red, a representation of the George Cross awarded to Malta in 1942 in recognition of the island's tremendous bravery in World War II appears in the top left corner of the white stripe. Tradition has it that the white and red colors were awarded to Malta by Count Roger I, the Norman ruler of Sicily, in appreciation for the hospitality shown him in 1090 when he ousted the Arabs. Here is the big, it's called the castle, right? It's basically where the Prime Minister lives and works. I believe lives? Anyway, I'm not sure. But it's like the big government building in Valletta. So this was a journalist named Daphne Caruana Galizia. She exposed a lot of corruption in the government and helped with the Panama Papers scandal. And she was assassinated in 2017 with a car bomb. It's really terrifying, you know. Here we have an old Catholic church. It's the Parish Church of the Assumption. Really pretty. Oh, can you see? There we go. All right. So these are their euro coins. They have the Maltese cross on them. Some terraced fields. You can see here, like I said, there's not a lot of arable land, so they make use of what they have. And a tourist spot on Camino. This is the Blue Grotto. It's a big tourist spot in the south of Malta. It's really, really beautiful. Lots of natural beauty. Heavy traffic on the island, and sadly, pollution as well. Oh, but look at this, a Maltese wall lizard. It's really cute. I like its colors. And this is a nature reserve that I'm not going to try to pronounce, but isn't it so beautiful? It looks kind of like, almost like Scotland or like Northern Ireland in a way. It's really, really pretty. Look at this guy. He's got a Red Bull. He's having a good time. A cafe here. And this is the old town of Valletta. It's like Valletta proper, basically. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And here's Gozo. You can see a lot more rural than Malta. This guy's having a little cappuccino, it looks like. Very, very European. Here's Valletta, and it's very distinct. The little, like, apartment windows along the walls, the buildings here. It's really, really beautiful. Here's some farms in Gozo. And another little small farm here. There's a girl working hard in school. She said she's learning about Maltese Euro notes. And this is the University of Malta. And a big map here for tourists. It says, let us show you around. And these are the carrozzine, which is kind of a debatable thing because people are worried about how the horses are cared for, but it's a really big Maltese tradition apparently to get carted around in these. And here's some very old buses they use for public transit. Look how beautiful. This is in the St. John's Cathedral in Valletta. The big altar, the beautiful painting above it. I think it talks about it in this book, how Caravaggio lived on the island for a time. I think it talks about it in here. I'm not sure. The Collegiate Church of St. Paul in Rabat. Very beautiful old building. Here's a roadside shrine. Very Catholic kind of thing. Just have a little mini saint shrine around. There's a cave here where it's believed St. Paul washed ashore, and it's like a very sacred place. And this is a basilica in Gozo. It's so beautiful. Really, really interesting. Here's a creche for Christmas. And this is Good Friday. It says a Good Friday procession. And this is for Saint Dominic, for his Saint's Day. They're having a big celebration for him. And Saint Agatha Tower, also known as the Red Tower. It's a watchtower, apparently. Here's a tradition that they have in Malta where they paint eyes on the boats. It's like a good luck kind of thing, or like warding away evil kind of thing. There's an old guy reading the newspaper. And a tombstone of Maltese writer Mikhail Anton Vasali. It says he was the father of the Maltese language. What else do we have? There's some London newspapers you can buy there. Read about what's happening in London while you're on Malta. And travel guides in lots of different languages. And look at this. This big dome. The Rotunda of Mosta, it says. Here's another temple. Isn't that so remarkable? It's so neat. And here's a bowl that was found, carved out of stone. There's been lots of pottery and things. Yeah, it does talk about it here, how Caravaggio lived briefly on Malta, did some paintings here. He's really famous for his work with light and shadow. That's what he's most known for. There's some of his paintings here. Look at this. Some of the tombs of the knights. Really, really remarkable. And the interior St. Paul's Cathedral. Very bright and beautiful. So over here we have a carnival float. And this apparently are suits of armor once used by the Knights of St. John. Isn't that incredible? What else do we have? Oh, how gorgeous. Imagine spending your day right there. Playing some soccer. It's awesome. And let's see what this is. It looks like we're talking about a park in Rabat. Really cool. They have their own traditional horse racing where they race in these little cart things. And there's some people fishing. This talks about how there's a Maltese tradition of bird hunting where they basically just, like every spring, they just shoot anything that flies with the motto, if it flies, it dies. But that's very, very much against EU regulations, so Malta is currently dealing with that, trying to figure out a balance. Beautiful fireworks over Valletta. Feast of the Assumption, it says. A big, big party by the looks of it. Oh wow, this is another carnival parade. What a costume. And let's see, the upside down cross of St. Peter for the festival of St. Peter and St. Paul. It's another beautiful church all decorated for Christmas. And an Easter parade reenactment. And a marching band. Apparently Malta is really, really intense about marching bands. Like it's a point of pride, something they've picked up from the British culture. Out at the cafe. And there's the market. You can buy some fresh fruit. And look at this. This is, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but it's like a big seafood soup. Kind of like in San Francisco here we have chapino, which basically looks like this. I wonder if it's very similar. Some bread here. And rabbit is considered the national dish. It's called fennec. And it's very, very loved. And here's some more. It looks like a kind of like a lasagna. And cannolis. Oh my gosh, look at the cannolis. Traditional Maltese coconut and pistachios. And then the traditional cannoli. Yum yum. And this is Kinney. It's a non-alcoholic drink that apparently like everyone in Malta drinks. What else do we have? Some widow soup. Traditional soup, blah blah blah. I'm not going to read the whole thing, it's going to make me hungry. And then some traditional bread, which again, not going to try to pronounce that. There's another great map of Malta, and then this shows you where Malta is in the world. At least it tries to. Can you see it? It's right there. Right there. Very, very small country. I believe it's the smallest country in the EU. So that's going to be it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a very good